This is the January 17th, 2023 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals. Present here today are Alan Morrison, Robert Richards, John Bennett, Chappie McKay, and me, your chair. Present from the planning staff are Lee Batchelder, Penny Ashby, and Omar Muhammad. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak identify yourself for the record, please, when you speak. We will conduct this meeting in the usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, the matter is uncontested. The Board of Zoning Appeals usually, but not always, approves uncontested applications. For all applications, the board reserves the right to ask questions of the staff, applicant, or others in attendance prior to rendering a decision. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there's opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do three things. Number one, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Number two, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And number three, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. Excuse me. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. By ordinance, I have to ask that anyone who intends to speak be sworn in. And so if you do intend to speak, please raise your right hand. And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You'll signify by saying, I do. Thank you. All right. We've got a pretty heavy agenda. So let's get going. Agenda A is review of minutes and deferred applications from previously advertised BZA-Z agendas. Number one is review of minutes of this December 2022 meeting. The draft minutes are in the packet. So motion. Mr. McKay has moved to approve the minutes. Mr. Morrison has seconded the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The minutes are approved unanimously. Section B under your agenda, new applications. Number one, 2628 Cumberland Street, PMS number 458-0503-087, 089, 090, 091, and 093. That application has been withdrawn. Item B2 on your agenda, 245 Hughes Street, North Central, PMS number 459-01-03-048, requesting the second one-year extension of a vested right that expires on January 21, 2023, pursuant to Section 54-962. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under Section 54-220 on January 21st, 2020, to allow a 150-unit accommodations use in an UPA, Upper Peninsula Accommodations Zone District. The owner is 245 Hugie Street, LLC. The applicant is Kira Brower, LS3P, and Sunju Patel, Montfort Group. Mr. Batchel.
This project was approved back in January of 2020, and it is due for an extension, which the applicants did apply for in a timely manner, and it satisfies the requirements for the extension, and so we recommend that the board approve this extension.
All right. Do we have anybody from the applicant here? Anything to say to the board this evening? Okay. All right. Any opposition to this application tonight? All right. Any questions from the applicant? Any questions to the city?
Move for approval.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve.
Second.
All right, Mr. Richard seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The request for the one-year extension of the vested right is granted. Thank you. Item number B3, 29 Beverly Road, Unit A, Old Windermere, TMS number 421-06-00-079, zoned SR2, requesting an appeal of the zoning administrator's decision to approve a residential short-term rental for this permit for this property. The owner is Matthew Cotton. Applicant is Dana Nettles. Congratulations.
This appeal concerns a property in Old Windermere. It's a residential property, and the appeal has been filed by neighbors of the property. They're appealing my decision, or the city zoning division's decision, to approve a residential short-term permit on this property, for this property. And so I'll just kind of briefly touch on the points that have been raised, and then my position, and then the applicant can speak. I believe that the owner of the property is present tonight too, so I think they ought to be given the right to speak. Normally an appeal is made by somebody who's not happy that I've turned them down, and it's the owner of the property, for instance, or somebody representing them, and normally the appeals are heard, and really it's just an appeal between that person and the board with my input on my position as well. But in this case, it's neighbors of the property, and so I've always felt that the owner of the property certainly should be entitled to speak as well. So 29 Beverly Road is a residential property in Old Windermere. It is unusual in that it has a second dwelling unit on it. So many years ago, I think the building is probably several decades old. And here's the zoning map just showing it, but you see the main house up front, and then you see a building at the back of the property, and this property backs up to the West Ashley Greenway. And so that building in the back contains a separate dwelling unit from the main house, and that's been there for a long time. And our records don't go back real far, but my position has been, since I've known about this building, that was a legal non-conforming use, because the neighborhood is zoned single-family residential. One residential unit per lot is allowed, and this has two dwelling units on that lot. So legal non-conforming use predating the zoning regulations, and allowed to continue in perpetuity. There's no time limit for that use. It's not unusual in the city of Charleston. The city has thousands of properties in the city that are legal non-conforming uses, because the number of dwelling units on the property or the type of use on the property does not conform to the zoning of the property. That's especially true on the peninsula, where we have these older neighborhoods that certainly predate zoning, which didn't come into play until 1930 in the city on the peninsula, and then 1960 forward in areas on west of the Ashley. So certainly on the peninsula, we have lots of properties that have multiple units that are not permitted by the underlying zoning of the property. And so in this case, the applicant obtained a short-term rental permit to have a residential short-term rental unit in the main house. They live in the main house. They wanted to have a residential short-term rental unit in the main house and part of that main house. The second, the dwelling unit in the back was not affected by that decision. That's not uncommon. Again, lots of properties in the city have multiple dwelling units when they're not permitted, and people have obtained short-term rental permits to use a part of that property for a residential short-term rental. So that's the situation here. That's what I've approved, and they are contesting it on the grounds that, and here's an aerial photograph, just again showing the main house, which is a 1.5-story house. And then the back building is a 2-story building. The residential unit in that building is on the 2nd floor, not supposed to be on the ground floor. Here's a view of the property from Beverly Road. So 1.5-story house up front. And the appeal that was filed by the neighbors, and this is the document that they filed indicating their reasons for contesting this decision. And so they cite a number of things in here. Item number 2 on this list references a South Carolina code section, and that code section pertains to building code requirements. So it doesn't apply to the zoning ordinance. Building code, as I understand it, requires that a residential homeowner, in order for them to obtain a building permit to do substantial work on their property, or maybe build a new house or build an addition onto that house, they have to sign a disclosure that gets recorded that says that they are the resident of the property and they intend to be the resident for a certain period of time. So that otherwise residential homeowners, homeowners are not entitled to pull building permits unless they meet that requirement. Otherwise, you have to be a licensed contractor to pull a building permit and do work. So I don't think that applies in this case, since it concerns building codes and not the city zoning ordinance. Then they go on and mention that section 54-214D, and I will just go through. So this is section 54-214D, and I realize that this is way too small for you to read, so I have copies here, and I think it's relevant for me to, it's certainly relevant to the case, so I'll go ahead and hand out a copy. So this section 214, 54-214 was first adopted by the city in 2020. And what this is a new section of the code that enables single-family residential properties. And there are many residential properties in the city that are zoned single-family, meaning they can only have one dwelling unit on the lot. it entitles these properties to have a second dwelling unit as long as it conforms to the requirements in this section of the code. And these requirements limit the size of the accessory dwelling, what's defined as an accessory dwelling unit. And they restrict the use, the occupancy, and that sort of thing. And one of the requirements in order to obtain a permit for a accessory dwelling unit or second dwelling unit on your property is that you have to agree to record, draft, or declarations of covenants and restrictions on that property that become a matter of public record that run with the property. And one of the restrictions that must be included in that declaration of covenants and restrictions is a restriction that prohibits the principal dwelling or the ADU from ever being utilized as a short-term rental. So once you obtain a permit for an accessory dwelling unit on your property, you're not entitled to a short-term rental permit for any part of that property. And this was adopted with the intent of trying to create more housing in the city, housing opportunities for people that would be able to utilize these properties, these accessory dwelling units. I always thought of them as Fonzie flats after the show Happy Days, which is a show I grew up on. Because Fonzie lived outside, behind the Cunninghams in a small apartment over the garage, and that was an accessory dwelling unit, 1950s style, that was portrayed there. So that's the idea here. So they're referencing this section of the code. Well, this section of the code was just adopted in 2020, and it was not intended to retroactively apply to all these dwelling units that existed in the city that were non-conforming. And so I don't think that applies to this property, and therefore should not restrict the use of this property for a residential short-term rental. Then they go on and cite another limitation. They reference the changes that the owner made a few years ago, and that ought to be, that exterior alteration ought to disqualify them. I don't agree with that, obviously. And then the final thing that I think they mentioned that I don't agree with is that for a residential category 3 short-term rental permit, there are conditions that have to be met. It's basically a conditional use. If you meet these conditions, we can approve the permit. And one of those conditions is that the size of the size and character of the SDR use must be subordinate and incidental to the principal residential use of the property. And they feel that the size of this story, which is where that short-term rental unit is located in the main house, that does not meet that requirement. So I disagree with them on that too. But so that's basically their argument. I think I've summarized it correctly. And so so my argument would be that that the homeowners are entitled to the residential short-term rental permit that they're paying. We didn't make any errors.
All right, thank you, Lee. So this is a little bit different than normal application. Usually I hear from the applicant, owner first, but here we'll hear from the appellant, and then we're going to hear from the owner. So Mr. Nettles.
Thank you. My name's Truett Nettles. I live on Beverly Road. I filed this appeal or objection to the grant of the SDR permit on behalf of some other people who are with us today. Ron Sassard, Karen Reed, Jim Hudson, Pam Tittle. There are other people who live on Beverly Road right in this area where Mr. Cotton is developing number 29 Beverly. I'll just summarize what we're doing. I like that aerial photograph. Did we see that, please? Thanks, because it shows you, if you look, the front house, the primary residence, is really a story and a half. It has dormer windows on the second floor. That's my house right across the street, has the same kind of construction. But if you look in the rear, there's a pretty large two-story building. The ground floor is, I guess, storage, and upstairs is a one-bedroom apartment that's been occupied, like Lee said. It's a non-conforming use. It was grandfathered because it was there before we had the zoning ordinances. But one of our concerns is the size of the thing. Lee complained that I brought up this thing about a disclosure statement. I put this in as an attachment to our objection. And in about the fourth line, it says the property owner who wants to do this building and improvements to the property, it says the building must be of your own use and occupancy. It may not be built for sale or rent. And I agree that that is in the building ordinances. But the word rent is there. And Mr. Cotton signed that agreement when he started making renovations to the property. And I don't know exactly what he's working on because I don't go inside his home. But there are builders there frequently. And things are still going on. And we think when Mr. Cotton signed this agreement, he was telling the city, I'm not going to rent it anymore. He's already got the non-conforming rental property in the rear. And so I think when he signed that, he waived his right to come back later and try to get a third dwelling on the property. The rear property, as Lee pointed out, is a non-conforming use. It was grandfathered. It's been there, in zoning terms, it's been there forever. And we're not complaining about that. We understand that. But that structure to the rear meets the current definition of an auxiliary dwelling unit. Now, when we passed the ADU ordinance, when the city did that, they didn't say we're going to now revoke all of the grandfathered rental properties and treat them differently. I'm not advocating that. However, that structure to the rear of this property meets the definition of an ADU. And if it is an ADU, it can't have more than 2 dwellings on the lot. And if it is an ADU, it has these limitations in section 54-214, which was read to you by Lee. So we're not saying that retroactively you're going to undo the grandfathering of that property, that rental unit. But now that it's there and now we have an ADU statute, that ADU statute should apply. And so effectively, this property owner had a rental unit already, and now he wants a second one, and the ADU statute says no. It says no more than 2 dwellings, and neither one of them can be an STR according to the ADU statute. And I just want the board to understand, we are not advocating to apply the ADU statute retroactively. All we're saying is going forward from the time when the ADU statute was adopted, it should apply. So we have an ADU here. It got in early under a different system. But now we have a statute, and we should treat the property according to the statute. Some of our people are just going to make a real brief statement here, but I just want to say that this is a real high density situation for a single family residential area. He already has a large structure in the back that's rental property. And now the property owner wants to have the second floor, have a 2-bedroom rental unit that could have 4 people. Now, the number of vehicles required is, I think, for the whole lot is, I don't know, 4 or 6. Lee probably knows that better than I do. But if we have the owner lives on the first floor with 1 bedroom, so he and his wife have a car. That's 2 cars. There are 2 bedrooms upstairs, short-term rental. So you could have 4 adults there, but at the very least, you might have 2 cars there. And then there is a rental property in the rear with a bedroom, and you could have a couple living there. That would be 6 cars. If guests come, there would be more. So one of the reasons the neighborhood is concerned is simply this is just going too far. It's going to change the nature of the neighborhood. I think it's really important in the STR statute. Ordinance 54208.33 says the size and character of an STR use must be subordinate and incidental to the primary residence. In this case, that's not happening. In this case, the primary residence is 1 bedroom on the first floor, 29 Beverly. The already existing rental unit in the rear, which got grandfathered in, but it is a rental unit in the backyard, in the back of the property, and it has people living there, and now they want a 2-bedroom rental unit on the second floor of the primary residence. So if you just look at that picture, the square footage on the second floor of the property in the back, and the square footage on the 2-bedroom rental unit on the second floor of the primary, all of that together, and all of the people, and all of the cars are more than the primary residence. So how can this STR be subordinate and incidental to the principal residence if there are going to be more people and more cars in rental property there than there are people who actually live there? In the past, we attached some other stuff where the staff has previously said that the grandfathered part of the back cannot be expanded. A prior owner from Mr. Cotton, actually 2 steps back, that owner tried to make the 3rd floor into a rental unit. And our staff and Lee himself denied it because that was before we had an STR statute. But even though we have the statute now, we have the ADU and we have STR, these statutes are not a license to go contrary to the whole theme of residential zoning. I draw the board's attention to Ordinance 54-105. It said, that section says, if there seems to be a conflict between 2 sections, like ADUs and STRs, the board should use the most restrictive interpretation. Because the purpose of zoning is not to define or protect you, let you do anything you want. The zoning ordinances are to protect a property owner and the neighbors and the neighborhood. And we would ask the board to deny this application because it violates these sections of the statutes. And most of all, it overwhelms the property. It overwhelms the residents. I haven't measured it, but the square footage and the number of people and the number of the cars are all more and higher than the principal residence. So I'd ask the board to deny that. We'd like to have a couple of comments from just some of the people. Aaron, want to just?
Yes, so if you'll please come on up to the podium, identify yourself for the record by name and property address where you live, and then if you could just please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Karen Reed, 28 Beverly Road. My husband wished he could be here. His grandparents actually built the property in 1949. They were one of the first residents in Old Windermere. And the house in the back of this property actually was built as a chicken coop in 1960. My mother-in-law, Amy Caroline, would happily come tell you many stories about growing up across from the chickens. But what I wanted to just share with the board is this neighborhood is a residential neighborhood with children. My husband isn't here because he's at home with our 5-year-old and our 3-year-old, who played with the 5-year-old and the 7-year-old 2 streets down, or 2 houses down. What you can't see in this is right down from us, so we're catty corner, there's a park. That park is actually being expanded as benches. Benches are being added for our dear neighbor who passed this year, Mr. Copeland Hendricks. There'll be more use of that park. People cross streets and walk to it. It's a very residential, very heavily foot trafficked area. Our wonderful city councilman has helped us improve our sidewalks. We have many grand oaks. We're very fortunate. We have some of the best oak coverage in the city. But because of that, our sidewalks are challenging for children to actually navigate, bikes and things like that. They're frequently in the streets. Adding this much car traffic is actually really detrimental and very concerning from a safety standpoint, especially for children. You know, the house I referenced, 2 houses down from me, their kids play basketball on the street every day. And it's where they have to play because that's how our neighborhood is set up. We don't have concrete driveways. It's one of the very nice characteristics, which I'm sure many folks can tell you from the character study that was done of Old Windermere a few years ago. So I just want to share again that I think it's really important that we maintain the character. I also want to throw out my day job when I'm not moonlighting at board meetings here is I'm the COO of a company. And it's a private equity company. In that role, I report to a board such as you. And frequently, they need to redirect the kind of positioning that my CEO and I take because there's different perspectives and ways of thinking about things. So really hoping that the board can think about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reed. Want to please state your name and address? Let's keep it to 3 minutes.
Good evening, my name is Ron Sassard. I live at 34 Berkeley Road, just down the street from this property. And, you know, I don't want to belabor the points too much, but, you know, again, our neighborhood was built in the 20s, 30s, and 40s for the most part, and they had no way of envisioning what we would be dealing with in our neighborhoods today. And so when you think of the cars that come into the neighborhood, I think Truett did an excellent job of kind of summing up the number of vehicles which would be coming into this property. And you have to also understand our roads, they don't have they don't have curves. Most of them have open ditches, so you can't hardly even park off the road. So it leaves limited parking. Most driveways are single driveways. Now, the ordinance allows tandem parking, but, when you think about that, that's not very practical, that people are going to start stacking cars with people who are staying, in an SDR and ADU. So it really is going to create a situation where it's just the infrastructure of our neighborhood is going to be overwhelmed. And to add to that, I don't know if you realize that Beverly Road is a one-way road, so the traffic, everybody's going to be coming in and out of that road. There's no way to get out of it except to come back down it. So, and I do believe that the authors of the ordinance, when they put the language in there about subordinate and incidental, and also about exterior modifications, I believe that they really meant to empower this board so that the board could consider preserving the character of the neighborhoods and making sure that I know it's a hard thing to balance, but many of us have lived in this neighborhood for decades, and we bought into it because we like these quiet neighborhoods, and this is why we're here, and so we are very concerned that these SDR and ADU ordinances are going to change that. So we're really asking the board to just consider that in their decision.
Thank you, Mr. Sass. Yes, sir. Please come on up, state your name and address.
Well, good evening. Thank you for hearing us. My name is Jim Hutchison, and I live at number 24 Beverly Road, which is directly across the street. So my wife and I are directly impacted by this change in zoning. I can only characterize it as a change in zoning because in 2002, when this issue came up before with the owner twice before, 2 times before, I in fact got an email from Mr. Batchelder that I have here with me. When we were alerting, the city to the fact that the third unit was being occupied. And he says here, this is 2004. Dear Jim, we have reviewed our file on this property and determined that a third residential unit violates the decision made by the Board of Zoning Appeals on October 20th, 1992. That this property is grandfathered for only 2 residential dwelling units. We are sending the owner a notice of the violation of the city's zoning ordinance and asking that the unit be vacated within 30 days, which indeed it was. And we were very appreciative of the city being a watchdog about that. But the word that I would, or the element of this email that I would emphasize for the board's consideration tonight, being that the STR ordinance has been enacted in the time being and so on, is the year 1992. So more than 30 years ago, and I've lived in the neighborhood for 27 years, so this even predates me, but 30 years ago, the city of Charleston, the zoning office, had the vision to see that that property could not be so densely occupied. And I would hate to look out my front window every day and see a parking lot full of visitors and guests and whoever else. I mean, it's just not room for all of those cars. The neighborhood was established in 1927. We're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the settlement of the neighborhood. I mean, to my mind, and I'm sure my neighbors will agree with me, we should be working to preserve the historic character of the neighborhood, not open it up to hodgepodge development, which essentially is what I'm looking at across the street with multiple dwelling units on a very, very small property. So, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak on behalf of the appellants, in other words, against the short-term rental?
I would just point out to the board, all of these people live on Beverly Road, this group of people. And they've all come because they're concerned and they object to this development. And that's all we have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Okay. All right. Well, let's hear from the owner, Mr. Cotton, who's here.
I'm going to speak. My name is Anthony Martin, his wife. So when we bought the property, it was we had 3 electrical meters, and there were 3 units. We took out the unit upstairs voluntarily after talking with the building office and the zoning office. So we're not looking to develop a 3rd unit up there. We are, when my husband signed the paper about occupying the property for the building office, we had no plans to do anything with that unit other than, and I think it's not even a unit, but with those rooms upstairs, other than provide a comfortable place for friends and family to come and visit and stay with us. We took out the oven, the stove. We took out the kitchen sink, and we did move the kitchen sink to the other side, but it's not the massive thing that it was anymore. We felt like it made it good. Having a sink up there was good for doing art projects and other, hand washing, things like that. So we don't have a stove up there. We have a small apartment refrigerator for keeping cold drinks. We have a coffee pot and a microwave for if our guests want to heat something up, we'll do so. And that's the way it's going to stay. We're not doing any further development. We recently, my husband had some health problems and had to stop working. So we were looking at our finances, and we looked into the regulations for a short-term dwelling unit. We meet the regulations. We meet the criteria in terms of parking, in terms of the size and the fact that we live downstairs. One of the concerns that was raised is that it seemed, the impression I feel like that was given was that the rooms upstairs are much larger than the space we occupy downstairs, which is not true. The downstairs area has about 2,000 square feet of living space. The upstairs area has about, I'm going to say about 1,200 because of the rooms. We have one bed up there. We're not looking at doing any doing 2 bedrooms. We're not even looking at renting it continually. We just applied for a short-term license to have that option if we want to have it. As far as the parking goes, I don't think it. You can see you can't really see a picture of the driveway, but we do have a lot and a half, whereas most of the people who are speaking tonight only have 1 lot. We have a large circular driveway with a parking area on one end and parking area on another end. I can show you a picture. There's a picture of the driveway. We don't need to have people park on the street, and generally we don't park on the street. And we would not expect any of the parking to be on the street. There are other short-term rental properties on both our street and Berkeley Street. And so that if for some reason our application is denied, then it would be only fair to deny the other applications, because why should we be singled out? And the last thing I'll have to say is yes, it's a lovely, quiet residential neighborhood, and we don't have any intention of infringing on that or bothering anybody. We're the kind of people that I feel like we should be wanting to do short-term rentals. We want to welcome guests on a part-time basis. We are not looking to have bachelor parties, and we are going to put that in our rules if we're approved. And as far as it being a residential street, there are people on the street who operate small businesses, and we don't have any objection to that. I'm surprised that they would have objections to us.
Mrs. Melvin, I have a couple of questions for you just so I understand exactly what's going on. Lee, can we put up the other overhead? All right. So what I would call the main dwelling structure, the home, the larger structure.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, prior to the permit being issued by the city, how is that structure? Is that structure one unit or is it split into 2?
It's not that straightforward an answer. It's not split into 2.
Okay.
But the upstairs rooms do have an entrance from the house. as well as an outside entrance.
Okay. And is that the permit that you received for the second story of that home to be short-term rental? Or is that
Yes, for the
Okay.
second story. Of
second story of the primary structure on the
Yes.
property?
Yes,
Okay. And you live downstairs?
we did that.
Okay. And prior to the permit being issued, how was the upstairs being used?
As a guest suite, when we had guests come, if I were taking a Zoom meeting, I would often go upstairs for quiet. We have one area where we have like our yoga mats and our workout weights. And there's a TV up there. If my husband wants to watch football and I want to watch something else, I'll go up there.
Okay. So you were not using it as a rental before you received the permit?
You know,
And then the second structure, tell me about how that structure is currently being used.
the upstairs is rented to a tenant that we've had since, I think it was 2019. We've had the same tenant. The downstairs area is storage and a workshop. It has tools, it has laundry.
Okay. So personal use, again, on the downstairs and a renter on the second floor that's a long-term rental. And they would not have permission to use the upstairs of the accessory building, for lack of a better term, the accessory back or short-term rental, or would they?
Well, this property, like the other properties in the area, are entitled to a Category 3 residential short-term rental permit. And that, you can only have one short-term rental on your property in that area. And that can be part of the main house where you live, or part of a residential unit, a room, 2 rooms, whatever. Or it could be if you have an additional dwelling unit on your property that was not permitted under the ADU provisions, the new provisions in the code, you could utilize that unit as a short-term rental. So they could have the short-term rental in that rear unit, is my opinion. And that's happened many times throughout the city on properties that happen to have those additional units that were not permitted under the ADU ordinance. But so yes, they could do that as part of the main house, like they've done, or using an entirely separate dwelling unit in the back as that short-term rental.
And that's based upon the permit that the city recently issued that's being appealed.
Correct.
If the permit had not been issued, then they would not have the right to a short-term rental on the second floor of the accessory structure.
Right.
Okay. And it's by virtue of the permit that they would have that ability.
Right.
Okay. All right. While she's here, does anybody else have any questions for the owner?
One question. Has that, and I don't know how long you've been in the property, has the rear building ever been unoccupied for a significant amount of time, to your knowledge?
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson.
Well, just one point of clarification. You made a statement, I think, about concerns from the neighbor. When we make these decisions, the decision conveys with the property. So I think part of the concern is what may happen after you're gone, if you ever sell that property. So I just say that because I don't want you to feel like it's about you. It's really about the property and the rights to use that property.
All right, so typically we do give an opportunity for a rebuttal to the applicant. So I'll allow Mr. Nettles to make a rebuttal and say
Thank you,
additional
sir. Just real quick,
comments. Yeah.
the property owner says there are 1,200 square feet on the first floor and about 800 square feet on the second floor of the primary residence building. That's probably true.
I think it was 2,000 on the first floor,
excuse me.
1,200 upstairs.
Okay.
I think, is that correct?
That's correct.
My house the footprint of it is about the same. And my upstairs and down is about 2,400 square feet. You know, I didn't measure this, so I don't know. And I will say the second floor has less square foot floors because dormer windows, you don't build out to the footprint of the building. You know, matter of fact, we use that space for storage. But when you count the already rental property they have in the big house in the rear, the other unit, and you add that to what they're going to propose to do upstairs, I think there's no denying the total rental square footage on that lot is going to exceed the living space for the owner. Last thing, she said, why are we singling them out? We don't really want to do that. We'd like to be good neighbors going forward. But the reason we're here is because there's already rental property in the back. And now they want to add another rental property. And we just think that is too much. And it's going to stress the neighborhood, and that's what everybody was here to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nettles. All right, anybody have any questions for Mr. Nettles or the appellants? Questions for Mr. Batchelder of the city?
Lee, I'd like to hear what you think about the argument they're making about the incidental and subordinate language in the SDR.
Sure. The language, and I'll just read it so we're clear. Get to that. The size and character of the STR use must be subordinate and incidental to the principal residential use of the property.
So their argument that combines the size of the SDR with long-term rental, you don't think is covered by that. That applies strictly to the size of the SDR compared to primary. I mean, how?
Well, it says residential use, so I think you can make an argument that the residential use is the ground floor of the main house and the second floor of the accessory building. It doesn't say it says the principal residential use of the property, so.
Principal use become rental if there are twice as many rental units as residential units. Am I misunderstanding?
Well, and so let's just go back and forget about the back building, but is the STR use in this main building subordinate and incidental to the principal residential use? That's
Of the main building.
of the main building. Okay.
You just read the whole thing to me one more time, I'm sorry.
The size and character of the STR use must be subordinate and incidental to the principal residential use of the property.
So your reading of that is the property is the main home here.
I'm fine with that, to simplify it.
Do you remember approximately when Mr. Kahn approached you about this?
About the STR?
Well, about the request.
No, I'm not directly involved in the application process. And so I don't recall. I'm going to say it was probably in November or maybe, November
Of 2021.
No, 2022. Right. So, and the way the process works is that we go through this, we receive the applications, the zoning staff, in this case, I've got the person on my staff that does this all the time, receives them, reviews them, and we'll post a sign on the property noticing the application prior to our approval. So that sign has to be up there for a certain number of days. And during that time, we're reviewing it to make sure we feel comfortable with the application, because they have to submit a number of pieces of information with that application form. And if we find that they meet the requirements, then we will go ahead and approve for zoning the permit request and forward that on to the fire marshal's office. They will then do their review, which includes an inspection of the property, and then it would get issued after that is complete. But what happens is when we post the property, of course, sometimes we get calls, phone calls, not uncommon. And in this case, that resulted in them disagreeing with our position that they met the requirements of the ordinance and that we were going to approve it. So it's never advanced beyond us, so they've never been issued the permit. So they're appealing our approval before it gets to the next step and actually gets issued.
Lee, what do you make of this email from 2004 that Mr. Hutchinson has pointed out? It's in our materials.
Right.
Where the city, through you, says that having a third residential unit violates the decision made by the Board of Zoning Appeals on October 20, 1992, that this property is grandfathered for only 2 residential dwellings.
So I agree, and that is still valid today. The property has had the second dwelling unit in the back, but not a third dwelling unit, not a legal third dwelling unit. And an STR use, short-term rental permit, entitles somebody to use part of their main house or part of a garage apartment or something like that, or a frog, a finished room over a garage if they have that. So it's not a separate dwelling unit. An STR is not, you're equating that to a dwelling unit that's not equal. A dwelling unit, by definition in the ordinance, is a living unit that has cooking, sleeping, and living facilities. So the bathroom, the kitchen. And the kitchen is what really distinguishes the space. And when we say a kitchen, that means it's someplace to cook, stove, oven, that type of thing, with the sink. And so it does not, the upstairs does not have a kitchen, so it's not really a dwelling unit by our definition.
Qualifies under an STR.
Right, because you do not have to have a dwelling space, dwelling unit to have an STR.
Portion of your space. But if the owner when did the short-term rental ordinance come into effect?
For this area of the city, I believe it was 2018.
The STR.
Right.
But they are if this was new construction and a new building, am I correct or incorrect that they could not do what they're seeking to do now? In other words, rent the second floor in a short-term rental, live on the first floor, and rent a portion of the ADR if it was new construction.
And the ADU was approved under the 54-214. No?
Yeah, well, if they would have to get the ADU approved, but they could not if they were short-term renting
Right.
the second floor of the primary, correct?
Right.
So the ADR ordinance would not help them to
Right.
accomplish what it is that they can do today. It's only by the grandfathered status.
Right.
And so are we not, in a way, letting them eat their cake and have it too by allowing a use that is grandfathered under the ADU, but giving the benefit of a new ordinance under the STR. And my concern is that you've got a non-conforming use. I'm looking at the property as a whole, and I'm thinking about the way that it was used, and that use that was grandfathered. And the use that was grandfathered was the residents are living in the primary residence and they are renting out a portion of the accessory unit. That's in the before condition of the property. Now, when they were getting the permit, it seems to me there's an expansion of that non-conforming use, because now what you have is you have an additional rental unit on the property, and you get the benefit of the STR, but you don't have to live by the ADU. So it just, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, again, I don't think it's an additional unit. It's actually defined, an STR is defined as an accessory use to residential use. So it's just like something, just like a home occupation is an accessory use to a principal residential use.
In other words, you view the two issues separately. You say, okay, I'm going to view the accessory dwelling unit, the ADU, that's its own animal and its grandfather.
Right.
And then we're going to use the STR ordinance itself to allow them whatever privileges are afforded under that ordinance. Is that the way? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
Just to confirm, and for my curiosity, the short-term rental permits, do they transfer across ownership of the property?
No, so they're only good for 1 year. And you have to renew each and every year. And so if you sell the property, a new owner has to come in and obtain the license. They don't transfer. Because the permit is based on the owner of the property residing on the property meeting the 4% residential assessment requirements.
Does that 4% apply only if you're, is that a function of if you are, I'm trying to remember that 4% exemption of that. You have to be an owner occupied, and you also, is there a percentage of the property that has to be residential, or is it strictly owner occupied?
I don't believe there's a minimum percentage of the property that you have to occupy. It's just that you have to reside on the property.
Questions or?
I'm still a little hung up on the disclosure statement, where it states that you will not seek to rent the property within 2 years. And we're in that, when the old building must be owned and use and occupancy. It may not be built for sale or rent. You sell or rent the building, you build or sell within 2 years after construction is complete. I know we're not supposed to be looking at building code.
Lee, who has the ability to enforce that covenant or that representation?
I believe that's the building inspections division within the city. They administer building codes. And I'll be happy to check with them on that issue, because if this was signed as a result of an effort to get a permit to do the work on the main house, then yeah, that could be a problem. It seems like.
I think that's a fundamental question.
My only issue is I'm not sure that this board has the ability to enforce, but I guess what you're saying is if we find out whether or not the building inspection department has an issue with that, it could rendered the appeal moot because the building inspector would enforce that term and not allow the rental.
Correct.
Know how long that process would take?
Well, next meeting is 3 weeks from tonight because of the 31st falls on, January falls on a Tuesday. And I am pretty certain I could get a response before then.
Once 2 years, it's an issue. Everybody's wording it.
So, you wanna, you wanna pull that up and we can all,
I think I've got it right here. I can.
I think it's actually on the presentation too.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There.
There we go.
You can rent.
Yeah.
Provided.
Says the building must be of your own use and occupancy and must not be built for sale or rent. Sell or rent a building, build or improve yourself within 2 years after construction is complete. The law will present.
So in other words, that's a presumption. It doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want after 2 years. It means that if you do it inside of 2 years, the law will presume
But
it,
doesn't it
right?
require you, isn't that a requirement that you stay and occupy your home? That you are making
Yes,
this approval.
but of course, this was dated March of 2020 and we're outside of 2 years, right?
2 years from completion of construction.
I just, with all these people here and all this argument, I would, as hard as this issue is, I would hate to see us keep it down. Keep it down the road. With this, that's just how I feel.
Okay, I don't mind, putting it to a vote, but somebody will need to make a motion unless anybody has some more questions for the city or the appellants. The other will need to entertain a motion.
Well, I'll just say, this is a hard one, and I'm sympathetic to everybody involved here. And I think it's a legal issue between neighbors who have different interests, and I can see why they have different interests. But I feel like a tough situation like this, from where I sit, we should try to adhere to what the law is on this issue. And I may be wrong, but I think the city has the law correct. And on that basis, I would move to affirm permit.
All right, so we have a motion to deny the appeal and affirm the permit. And so we'll need a second, and I think typically we vote, voice vote in unison. I think we'll need to do a roll call on this one because I think this is difficult question. So, is there a second to Mr. Morrison's motion?
I'm glad to make the second, so we can.
All right, Mr. Morrison moves to deny the appeal and affirm the permit. Mr. McKay seconds that motion. Mr. Morrison, your vote, sir? In favor of the motion. All right. Mr. Bennett?
Opposed.
Mr. McKay?
I'm opposed.
Well, okay.
Okay, well, I support the motion to deny.
Yes, okay. So you are voting in favor of Mr. Morrison's motion that you seconded, right?
No, I'm voting
You're against
against
it.
it. Yes.
Okay, I might need to get Robert's rules out. All right, Ms. Richards?
Also opposed.
All right, opposed to the motion. I'm opposed to the motion. Mr. McKay's whether that's a procedural snafu or not, we have enough votes to deny the motion. And so now I think we technically probably do need a motion to do more than deny the appeal. We need a motion to grant the appeal. So somebody want to move to grant the appeal?
I will move to grant the appeal.
All right. Do I have a second for that? Ms. Richards, okay. All right. Move to grant the appeal by Mr. Bennett. Second by Ms. Richards. All right. Mr. Morrison. Opposing. All right. Mr. Bennett.
In favor?
Mr. McKay. Ms. Richards. And I am in favor of granting the appeal, so your appeal is granted and the decision of the zoning administrator is overturned. Thank you.
We don't want to interrupt your meeting, but can we scoot out the door?
Please.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is B4 252 Congress Street. Mr. Morrison, I think you are recused on this one. This is Hampton Park Terrace, TMS number 460-02-04-100, zoned DR-1F, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a one-story addition, bedroom, bath, closet that extends a non-conforming 13.7-foot total side setback, 15 feet are required. Requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow a stair landing with a 7-foot 2-inch west side setback, 9 feet are required. The owner is Mitzi G. Ball. The applicant is Tyler A. Smythe, Architects. All right, Mr. Batchelor.
This application concerns a residential property, and you can see it here on the zoning map. The building sits all the way over on one side of the lot, not unusual in this neighborhood. So there's very little side yard on that side. And what they're asking for is an approval to construct a rear addition. So you see the existing on the left, and then they would remove these rear additions that are not, I don't think they're original to the house, and then go back with a new addition that extends that non-conforming east side yard setback. And so that's the special exception. And actually it's extending the non-conforming total side setback, because you have to total up 3 foot over here and what they've got on this side, and it doesn't equal the 15 feet that is required. So that's a special exception, one-story addition, and very minimal. And believe that we have that they've talked to the neighbors and they're supportive of this. This was actually on the agenda back in December, and it was only after we had advertised it that we realized that they were also adding the staircase over here on the side of the building, and that staircase requires a variance because it is part of the building and it's less than 9 feet off that side property line. So we had to defer this until this meeting in order to hear the whole request. So again, just a simple little one-story stair that's being added. Elevations, you can see the existing on top and the proposed on the bottom. Minimal impact. And so we feel that this meets the special exception requirement, and we feel that they have a case for a variance to allow this very minor encroachment into that setback. So we recommend approval of this request.
All right, thank you, Lee. Is there anybody here who's opposed to this application for 252 Congress Street? If you are, all right, nobody's here to oppose the requested special exception variance. Do we have the owner applicant here?
Yes, sir.
All right, would you like to say a few words to the board, or you could? Okay, thanks. All right, I think we barely have a quorum. Okay, so, any questions for the applicant? Any questions for Lee? I do hear a motion.
Move for approval.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The special exception and the variance are granted unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
All right, item B5, welcome back, Mr. Morrison, One Country Club Drive, Country Club, PMS number 424-00-00-004, requesting a special exception under section 55-110 to allow an expansion of a non-conforming use, private golf course facilities in an SR1, single-family residential zone district. The owner is the Country Club of Charleston. The applicant is Thomas and Hutton, Tony M. Woody. Mr. Batchel.
So the country club on James Island is a legal non-conforming use. It's, we don't, whatever in our zoning ordinance doesn't allow private golf courses in the single-family residential zoning district. And I'm sure that that will be fixed when our new zoning ordinance is adopted in about 2 or 3 years from now. But in the meantime, we got to deal with this, and we've dealt with it in the past. They've made expansions of their clubhouse. They've constructed a brand new, larger pool in place of the old one. They've added tennis courts. They've done all those things over the years, and this is the way we've treated it in the past. Well, this time we're dealing with the maintenance facilities that exist in this corner of the club property, and I've outlined that area in blue, but that piece is part of the larger country club property. And it's just where they have their maintenance facilities, and you can see it's zone residential. It's adjacent to residential properties, and they want to make some improvements over there. And I don't believe we've ever had any applications for this particular piece of the course over the years. So I'm sure that the facilities are in great need of some updating. Bunch of maps here. Get right to the plan. So this is the existing survey showing the trees, and they've got access from this at Chevis Street over here into some sheds, maintenance buildings, and they would like to get rid of all that and replace it with new buildings and a new layout for the paving and the gravel areas and all that sort of thing. So this is the new plan, and close-up view of that plan. I think this is pretty heavily landscaped over here right now, if I remember correctly. And then of course you have all these existing trees up here. Here's a aerial view with the new plan imposed on it. And yeah, you can see the vegetation that exists over here, and then the vegetation that they will keep on the other sides of the property. This is the closest house over here. This is a residential property at the end of Pickard Street. And then you've got this house over here in Country Club 2. And then some residential properties over here across the street. But and so this is on your agenda as an expansion of the non-conforming use with the expanded maintenance facilities or revised new maintenance facilities that they have here. And so light and air impacts and parking, traffic, things like that. Those are the kind of things that are considered, and certainly potential impacts from the noise and aesthetics. But they have done some outreach, I know, and I did see an email that I did not include in this from this neighboring property owner over here, who I happen to know who they are, and so I was happy to see that they had reviewed the plans and were fine with it. At least they haven't expressed any opposition to me with this. So I believe that they've met the requirements. I know that they've been good neighbors over the years and will continue to be. So my recommendation is for approval. I'm not aware of any objections or concerns from anybody with the plans here. Like I said, it's been this maintenance facility for many, many years in this location. So probably maybe before the construction of the home gets surrounded. So anyway.
Thank you, Lee. All right, is there anybody here wants to speak in opposition to the country club application? All right, there's no opposition to this application for One Country Club Drive. Do we have the other applicant?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, my name is Tony Woody. I'm with Thompson Engineering Company. I have a couple folks representing the owner here as well. We appreciate Lee and Penny's efforts and here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Okay. Any questions for the owner applicant or the city? Do I have a motion? Mr. McCabe moves to approve. Second. Mr. Morrison seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously and the special exception is granted. Thank you very much. And the next item on our agenda is B612 Rebellion Road, South Windermere, TMS number 421-09-00-074, zoned SR1, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow a 3-story addition, storage, screen porch, living room, deck, flex room, laundry, with a 1-foot 4-inch north side setback, 9 feet of required. The owners are Kurt and Anna Maria Kameyer, and the applicant is Laura F. Altman, LFA Architecture. Mr. Betcha.
This is a residential property in South Windermere, and you can see its location here on the zoning map. And one thing you can see right away is that the house itself is not in the middle of the lot. It's pushed over to one side. Here's an aerial view of that house, and back in this corner of the property there is a grand tree, a live oak, that I believe caused the previous owner and architect to design the house and place it where they did on the lot. I think the house was constructed in about 2012, so it hasn't been there that long, but that is a characteristic of the property for sure. And the applicant submitted these plans and with this proposed addition, requesting the variance. We have not really ever met with them and have exchanged some emails and phone calls last week, but haven't really had a chance to sit down and talk about this. But so let's talk about this site plan. This is the existing site plan. You see the house situated closer to the left side, and the driveway over here. And then this is the Grand Tree location right here with the protective zone that is required by the city's zoning ordinance for this tree based on its size, the diameter of the trunks. And so it certainly impacts the property. But you also notice that there's a driveway right here, and so there's paving already in the protective zone. And here's a site plan just showing what they're proposing to do, and this is the highlighted or enlarged version of that. But they would like to construct these additions on the left side of the property of the house, closer on the side that's closer to the side property line. So right away, to construct a sizable addition on this side of the house, you're going to encroach into that 9-foot side setback that's required. And so I've highlighted the portion of the proposed addition that does encroach, and it comes as close as 1 foot 4 inches in this area right here. And so that's a sizable encroachment into setback that is required for this neighborhood. And I would venture to say most properties probably meet the 9-foot side setback. Some even exceed it. I found one a few houses down that probably has a encroachment, a carport that comes fairly close to the side property line, but it's just a 1-story structure. And what's proposed here is as tall as the existing house, basically. So this is the existing house, photographs of the house, and the addition would go back here, looking from Rebellion Road. And this kind of shows you an outline of where that addition would go here. And then these are floor plans. So the ground floor is a garage storage area. And so this would be more storage and an area under the screen porch or a screen porch. And then above, we would have the addition off the main living level of the house. Then, and with the 1-story, I'm sorry, this is the second floor. Yeah, this is the first floor. Yeah, so this is the first floor. So here's the living space in the house right now, and an addition over here with a screen porch. And then going back, there would be on the second floor, there would be additional bedroom space, laundry room, and roof view, existing and proposed. So here's just a view showing that proposed addition right here. The side view change, right? This is the proposed right down here. Here, elevation, you can see this area being added. And so back to, so that's what they're requesting. And again, this application came in mid-December, and our initial efforts are just to try and figure out what people are applying for and make sure we get the correct information on the agenda, to get it to the newspaper, to be advertised, and then we start looking at the actual applications and thinking about what they're requesting and trying to come up with a position. And so because of the holidays, of course, that gets affected a little bit. And by the time I got a chance to really look through their application and read the materials, it was a week or so, well, a week and a half probably before the meeting, and I sent the email last week saying, I just don't think I can support this. To me, what they're requesting is a pretty significant encroachment. It's reducing the side yard for this section of the property down to 1 foot 4 inches. And that to me is a pretty character defining feature of these neighborhoods. Like it or not, they were built with these rules in place, and so they have side yards. There's space between houses, and for this addition to be built in this location, reducing that side yard down to 1 foot 4 inches leaves a side yard on the other side, because that house is set back a fair ways from the side property line, but that's not necessarily going to stay that way in the future. And the trend is that these older homes get torn down and replaced by new, larger homes. And that's happening in lots of these neighborhoods, and it will, I'm sure, continue to happen. And it just seems like this is a pretty significant change from that pattern that exists in the neighborhood. So I felt like I couldn't really support this. And I also thought that there might be options. And so this is what I sent to the applicant last week, just saying, okay, well, can't you balance the size of the addition on both sides with removing this portion of the addition over here, keeping this over here, modifying it, adding some space over here. Encroachments into protective zones happen, especially with live oaks. They're very resilient trees, and I don't know that this configuration would really adversely impact that tree. So this was a suggestion, and we just haven't had a chance to really sit down and explore this. But so I feel like I'm not able to support this at this time. I just don't feel comfortable supporting this much of a variance for this proposed addition. So that's my case.
Thank you, Lee. Do we have anyone here to speak in opposition to the application?
Oh, and I should point out
Yes, please.
that they did obtain this from the neighboring property owner on the side of their property where the addition is proposed. So this is the most effective neighboring property owner at 14 Rebellion Road, and they say that they have no objections to the proposed changes.
Okay.
So that's important.
Thank you, Lee. And so the city recommends denial. Is there anyone here opposed to the application for 12 Rebellion Road? All right, we have the owner or applicant. Okay, please go ahead and take the podium, state your name and what's about the application.
My name is Laura Altman, LFA Architecture. I'm representing Anna Maria and Kurt Meyer with 12 Rebellion. This is in the South Windermere neighborhood in West Ashley, and as we said, it was built around 2012. We're requesting this setback so that we can allow a 570 square foot addition footprint with an encroachment of only 211 square feet into that side setback. I want to go through the variance test. So if we can go back one slide to A01. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So the extraordinary exceptional conditions of this property, of course, are the large oak tree here that has an effective diameter of 47.5 inches because it's a double oak and 24 foot setback from the trunk. So that's within 7 feet of the house itself. The house is also, as Lee mentioned, sited closer to the left or north property line because of that tree, and that leaves us limited space to expand. There's also another live oak here, limiting space to expand. These conditions do not generally apply to the other property in the vicinity. Can we go back to the GIS map? The one that shows all the neighborhood. Keep going back. Right there. Yes. This house, here's our property. And it's one of the smaller lots in this area, because it's one of the interior lots and it's a single lot, unlike some of these larger ones that are a lot and a half. In addition, it's a relatively small footprint as compared to many of the other houses in the neighborhood. And those that are smaller tend to be situated in the center of the property, giving them more options to expand in different directions. Then the third part of the test, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance, particular piece of property, would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict utilization of property. Can we go to A002, which is just after the surveys?
You have to help me out.
Next one. Keep going. One more. Yeah. So we have only 8 feet at the rear to expand here beyond the existing stairs, and 9.5 feet here on this side to expand. And as Lee had shown, he sent me the kind of the proposed possible footprint to expand in that direction within the setbacks, but that doesn't allow enough space for the goals for my client and their growing family. Expansion to the right side we did explore expanding this way, but and also this way. If we expand here, where we're outside of the setback, we're blocking the access to the garages. And then, as Lee mentioned, proposing an 8 by 16-ish addition here, expanding into the tree setback minimally, that we could probably get a variance for that. However, the existing floor plan isn't conducive to that. You can go forward to the first floor plan. Hold on. The existing, this a stair here, the proposed addition would be right in this area by staff. The stair is a switchback, so that prevents access there. We have an elevator chase here. It's a chase right now, but it's going to become, the elevator will be installed. And then we have stacked bathrooms. So the only access to this area would be through a bedroom, through a 2-foot wide closet door. So that's not feasible. We did study extensively, looking at options going out further into the tree setback, but just getting access required a lot of modifications to the stair system in the entire house, as well as much more significant impact on the tree in order to meet the goals. The layouts just didn't work, but we studied multiple options in that direction. Okay, going to the fourth part of the variance test. The authorization variance will not be a substantial detriment to adjacent property or the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of variance. I'll go back again. I should have given you a PowerPoint with the order I needed, but go back to the site plan. That's good, yes. So as I mentioned, the addition that we're doing, this cross-hatched area, is 570 square feet in footprint. The gray or yellow in some of the slides is 211 square feet that's encroaching. This affects 32 feet of the entire property line, which is 130 feet deep. That's about 25%. And I realize we're encroaching very close to that setback in order to get the spaces we need in the interior. But the addition is set back 73 feet from the property line here, and then about 87 feet total from the street itself. So we are maintaining significant side yard into the property. The addition is 32 feet deep this way and 16 this direction. But of the addition, we're stepping down the massing. So this section here, the front half, is the same height as the rest of the house. But then we have half here that is it's a 1-story above that ground floor level with a low slope pitch roof. And then this rearmost section at the main level is an open deck. So if you go to the elevations, Lee, where the perspectives and all work, you pointed out right here. So yes, this massing is tall in order to be consistent with the rest of the house, so that it matches, that it's part of that house and not an odd add-on. And then you can see to the rear, the lower roof and then the open deck. And if you'll go one more slide forward, please. So again, here's the addition. The 32 feet in this direction, but only half of it the full height. And then the section that has the low slope pitch roof and the open deck. So we're stepping down that massing. So the bulk of the encroachment that's at the closest part is the taller portion, but not a full mass. We don't have that much mass over that full encroachment. And there are no windows on that north side, from a privacy standpoint, but also for the fire code compliance. We are not aware of any objections from any other neighbors, and as Lee mentioned, we have a letter from the neighbor to the left, the north at 14 Rebellion, and they're the most affected by this addition. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant?
Ms. Ullman, what is the code requirement for that distance to get windows on that side? Is it 3 feet? How far off? I guess.
I have to there's a percentage. I think it has to be 5.
Okay.
But we've got windows on the towards the front and towards the back. That in this particular case, with the way the layout works, it wasn't necessary, and that allows privacy for
You talked about studies to the, I guess, north and south side. I was curious about the impact if you were to extend the other directions towards the rear, or I think it's the rear of the property, as opposed to the side, how that would work. That might be it.
We have a 25-foot setback from the rear, which does give us a little more room to stay away from the property line. However, we also are looking at a modest pool to go in the back, and with the tree setback, we have to stay far enough away from the tree. So that's what we have, and that's not a huge piece of 13, I think it's 15 by 25. So we would still be extending kind of in this area, and then the access issues start to, or having problems with the access and making things work and flow at this area. So in this case right now, we're respecting that rear setback completely. The addition does not extend beyond the rear setback, we're only going into the side.
Any other questions for Ms. Altman?
I had a question from way back to the beginning where the trees were. Were there other trees that were affected by the addition or no?
Yes, but they're smaller, and I've talked with Derek Schultz, and he said they don't require a variance or any sort of special approval to remove those. One is a palmetto and one is a live oak, but it's much smaller.
Yeah, I thought I had seen a couple other trees with X's in them. I just wasn't sure about that.
Yes,
So I
I
have-
checked with them because I was going to send in an application for it to BZA site design. And he said that would be necessary.
I have a couple of questions. Ms. Altman, if you'll indulge me. The extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the property, in your opinion, those are the trees?
The tree, and just that because of the tree, the house is sited kind of lopsided to the left of the property, leaving us little room to expand in any
And
direction.
there are trees in other lots in the neighborhood. I mean, I know South Williamsburg pretty well. There are a lot of trees in the neighborhood on those lots there.
I'm sure there are, I have not noticed that we have footprints quite so shifted over because of a large tree, the way this is situated.
And you're not arguing that those conditions prohibit the use of the property, but you must be saying that they unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property.
It unreasonably restricts our ability to expand the existing house to use the property the way my clients need to use it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand that. Anybody else have any other questions for the applicant?
Did your clients build this house originally
No.
constructed?
When did they buy it?
September 26, 2012.
It had already been constructed, but they didn't have, y'all didn't have the option to do, it was a spec.
Do you have anything for us? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for Lee? Any discussion? Lee, I know you said something about setbacks and character, but when you had that other GIS map up, it looked like there were several properties that didn't meet that setback requirement. Just naked eye, just looking at maybe 70, and 70 looks like a zero setback.
One thing I'll point out is that it was in the 90s, I'm going to say probably about 1994, when we changed the side yard setbacks for this zoning district and the SR2 zoning district. They were 6 feet and 12 feet, 6 feet on the north or east side, 12 feet on the south or west. And so this property would have had a 6-foot side setback on the side we're talking about back then. And that was was confusing. It was unnecessary, we thought, so we changed it to 9 and 9. So some properties may be as close as 6 feet, for instance, although this is on the south side, so I don't know. This is the one property I was mentioning that has a part of its house. I think it's a 1-story house, but it has a 1-story carport, and that's what this is over here. So it's very close to the side property line.
It's not enclosed space, it's the carport. Is that
Right.
Is the same true for 70 of the carport?
17.
70.
Oh, that one, I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
You invited the applicant to work with you on something that you thought would be less intrusive.
Well, I proposed that. I had that slide where I sort of added on to both sides of the house to try and get them the square footage with the thing. Center, that was just a thought. And like I said, we just haven't really had a chance to sit down and communicate much about that. But
I also have questions for Lee. This is a difficult circumstance where the city recommends denial. No one is opposed in terms of the neighbors, but
As we have deferred to allow applicants an opportunity to restudy certain issues that the board may present. I wonder, I would propose that I would support the motion to defer, to allow the applicant time to work with the city to develop something the city is more favorable towards.
all right, so we have a motion to defer the application by Mr. Bennett. Do I have a second?
I'd say,
All right, Mr. Morrison seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The matter is deferred. If you'll work with Lee and maybe come up with something or not, come back with the same application, but it'll be deferred until at least the next meeting, and we'll see what can be worked out in the meantime.
Does that mean it's deferred so that, like, I know you have to do the announcement through the paper and all. Is it deferred to the very next meeting, or do you have to wait the full month?
well, the next meeting is 3 weeks from tonight. Instead of the usual 2 weeks, it's 3 weeks because the 31st falls on Tuesday. So I think we should, I don't know what your schedule is, but I'm available to talk and discuss this. So I would think we could have it on the next agenda.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is B7 Evergreen Street, Lot 25, Ardmore, Sherwood Forest, TMS number 350-07-00-174, zoned STR, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow 2 dwelling units with 4,354 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. 4,500 square feet are required. The owner is Verdesian. Thank you. Verdesian LLC. The applicant is Jeremiah McDonald. All right.
So this is a vacant lot in Ardmore, and here's a zoning map showing the location of the lot. And what you see is in green are residentially zoned properties that are part of the Ardmore neighborhood. And then the red indicates all the commercial properties that are along Savannah Highway. And so this part of the neighborhood is the edge of the residential section of the neighborhood that abuts the rear side of those commercially zoned properties. And you see other buildings on Evergreen Street in this block. And the lot itself, which is similar in size to many other lots in the immediate area. the lot size and the lot zone STR, which means single and two-family residential. If you have 9,000 square feet of lot area or more, you're entitled to 2 residential units. But if you have less than 9,000 square feet, you're only qualified for 1 residential unit on the property. And except for this property on the corner of U and Evergreen Street, which is a quadruplex, the other lots on the street, as far as I can tell, are all single-family residential lots. So some of those lots are large enough to have 2 units, but they don't. They only have 1 residential unit. But this lot, the lot next door, these 2 lots are not large enough, actually, and these lots too, are not large enough to meet that 9,000 square foot lot size requirement. This lot is 292 square feet shy of meeting the 9,000 square foot requirement. So my position has always been, if you don't meet the requirement, you don't get the 2 units. And that's the case here. The applicant is certainly entitled to apply for a variance, but I feel like there's absolutely no grounds for getting a variance to do this. We would essentially be rezoning the property and enabling the other lots that are similar in size to have the same 2 unit configuration. So I recommend against the granting of this variance, and I can go through the rest of the slides just showing this is the survey that lot size is based on, so we know exactly what we're dealing with. And then this is information that was provided by the applicant. There is a duplex on this property, but the other lots on this side of the street, except for this one on the corner, are conforming single-family residential uses, as far as I can tell. Another view of the property, and these are just drawings showing how they would build the 2 units on the property, which are not really relevant to the specific request. But so that's my position, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lee. Do we have anybody here in opposition to?
Oh, and I should
Yes.
point out, let me just point out one thing. We did get an email today from Matthew Larson at 1622 Evergreen Street, indicating they're opposed to this variance request. Sorry.
No problem. Is there anybody here in opposition to the application? Or
I'm in opposition slightly.
yes, sir. Please state your name.
My name is Justin Duro.
Okay.
Actually, I'm in lot next to him.
Okay. So if you'll just give us one moment, I needed to find out whether or not there was opposition. I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak, but I do want to hear from the applicant owner first, and then anybody who is here in opposition can then speak, and then he'll get a chance to rebut. So, sir, you're the owner.
Yeah, no, the applicant.
Applicant. Okay.
Jeremiah McDonald.
Thank you.
And I was just applying for a zoning variance to use the lot for what the zoning said it could be used for, but when I dug deeper into it and saw that I was a couple hundred, almost 1 million square feet shy, I applied for variance. As you know, as you said, it's mostly commercial around there. The halfway house, I think, is no longer there, and it's just vacant, and the lot is just garbage. I'd like to do something with it. I'd like to do something nicer with it. It still kind of fits in because, you know, we talk about character of neighborhood, but again, it's a road shop across the street. But, funeral, thank you. Yeah, next to that, and, you know, and then Chick-fil-A right there, which has an entrance right off of Evergreen.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Jeremiah? Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. Now we're ready for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my name is Justin Hill. I'm the lot next to him. I have the same issue for some reason, we're a couple hundred feet short to be able to build on the pool. But, I'm not in absolute opposition. I know you said that we don't fit the requirements, but I mean, if we can work out some type of agreement, I'll do whatever I have to try to make the change for the square footage. Because it's a couple hundred square feet, I don't think it's half. It's a quarter of a basketball court. But to me, the materials do matter. The character of at least that street. Everybody in that street is either a cinder block, stucco cinder block, or a brick building. On the other side of White Oak, they did put up the slab, stick building, basically. You know, it's like panel building, wood panel building. I mean, it's whatever. That's what they do. But for me, I would tell me or show me that you're gonna build a brick or cinder block or something like that. I would be open to that because my property can do the same thing. So I'm not in total opposition, but I think as far as the materials, that is an issue for me as matter.
Thank you, sir. All right, yes, ma'am.
I think board. My name is Megan Deshane. I live at 1622, so I'm actually the property to the right that is, I guess, technically qualified for a two property build out. We are opposed to the building of 2 units on the property. I think that it does not reflect the current layout of the neighborhood being single family units. I don't think it would add value to our neighborhood or its residents. I also don't really think that it would be a wonderful place to live for those residents if they were to have it, as they would not have any space for walking outside of their driveway. We are not opposed to it being developed. As Jeremiah stated, it is currently often used as a dump site. So to have that space developed in a meaningful way where it would reflect the nature of this current use would be delightful, but I'm definitely opposed to a 2-house unit adjacent to our single house neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, anybody else in opposition to the application at Evergreen Street? All right, Mr. McDonald, you have an opportunity to provide if you'd like.
I would like to, as you can see on there are quite a few multi-family residences, especially right behind Austin. There's a duplex there on the corner. We have a daycare on the corner. We have a duplex on the other corner there. It's actually, according to the map, zone commercial. And then the sixplex there. So of all those places, I'd say it's about half single family. Rest are multi-family. And the quadplex is on like a 7,000 something square foot lot.
What quadplex are you talking about?
The one on the corner next to you?
No, it's a pentaplex.
It's a what?
It's a pentaplex.
Oh, okay.
5 units.
Well,
We meet the requirements though, because I've had this issue, I've looked into this, that they have enough to work.
All right, thank you. You can take the rest of that discussion offline. Yeah. Anybody have any questions for the owner or any of the folks in opposition or legal? Questions, discussion, do I hear a motion?
Who denied the variance?
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Morrison to deny the variance. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The variance is denied. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. The next item on our agenda is BZA-Z Ashley Avenue, Cannonboro, Elliottboro, TMS number 460-11-02-050, zone DR-2F, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow a detached accessory structure chimney and pergola with a 6-inch north side setback, 3 feet are required. The owner is Betsy Berry. The applicant is Ross Ritchie, Loyal Architects. Mr. Batchelder.
233 Ashley Avenue is a residential property, has the main residence and the historic home up front, and then a second dwelling unit in this 2-story building at the back of the property. And what the applicant is requesting approval for is a chimney and pergola structure. And so you see the main house up front right here, and the second dwelling unit back here. And then in this area between the two buildings, they're proposing a pergola and this chimney. The chimney structure itself would be 6 foot 4 inches wide by 6 feet tall. That pergola and chimney would be within 3 foot setback that is required. So it would have a 6-inch setback from that north side property line, which is consistent with the historic home on the property right here. That has a 6-inch setback from this north side property line. So with this type of structure, here's a blow up just showing that it's really a minimal impact. In fact, they are entitled to build a fence along this property line that's 7 feet tall, which would be a foot taller than the chimney they're proposing. So, but we do treat these types of improvements, these types of structures as buildings for the sake of applying building setback requirements. So they have to come through this process. They don't meet the setbacks. But it is such a minimal impact. Here's a view, elevation view right here, that I have no objections to the granting of the variance for this. And property to them, I don't know if the applicant obtained any or contacted the property owner to the north, but our county property records indicate it's an absentee owner and rental property. So I don't think it would have any adverse impact on that property owner anyway. So my recommendation is for approval.
Okay, thank you, Lee. So do we have anybody here in opposition to the application for a variance at 233 Ashley? All right, no one is here in opposition. Do we have the owner applicant here? All right, sir, would you like to address the board?
I'm Ross Ritchie with Loyal Architects, and just appreciate your time. If you have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Ritchie. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Ritchie or questions for Lee?
Quick question for Mr. Ritchie. Yep. Just curious, from a building code standpoint, is a 6-foot chimney that close to an adjacent property a problem? And I don't know. I'm not that familiar with the rest of the building code.
Well, it's actually not a chimney, it's a fireplace.
Okay.
That was, so it just has to be, it just didn't,
Gotcha.
it just kind of, I mean, a lot they live in houses that don't have chimneys, so it's just pretty much a box and set in the masonry.
Yeah.
Kind of size it. Yeah, no, yeah, they can't have
With flue.
no. Yeah, so everything would be kind of within the setback sitting there. And the consent was designed in a way that's kind of part of the wall that off the wall that don't have that same landscape.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Anybody else have any questions for the applicant or Lee? I do hear a motion. All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously, and the variance is granted for 233 Ashley Avenue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Right, the next item on our agenda is B9, 563 King Street, Canonboro, Elliottboro, TMS number 460-12-02-073, Zone GB, requesting a variance from section 54-415 to allow a right angle sign with 10.4 square feet of sign face area per side. The limit is 9 square feet per side. The owner is Upper King Partners LLC. Applicant is John Massillon, attorney for Honey Hive. Mr. Batchel.
So this is a commercially zoned property on King Street. It has this three-story building with the ground floor commercial space. This is not the business that's in it today. This is a older map before that business occupied the space, but that is the building. And they are applying for a variance to allow this right angle sign that projects off the front of the building to be larger than the 9 square feet that is allowed by the zoning ordinance per side. So when we have these unusual shapes like this, the zoning ordinance states that the calculation of the sign area shall be calculated as the entire area within a rectangle enclosing the extreme limits of the sign face, including any frame or border. So I have to draw a rectangle around that sign and then take the square footage of that space as the calculation for the sign area. So that's going to include the areas that are not actually sign face. But that is the requirement of the ordinance. And in this case, they come up with a sign face area that is 10 feet, 10.4 feet of total sign face area per side. So 1 foot 4 inches, or 1.4 feet over the maximum allowed 9 square feet per side. And I kind of look at these as the same way I looked at that previous one on Evergreen Street. If you meet the requirements, you're entitled to that, or whatever is allowed. But if you don't, then I don't think there's you shouldn't be allowed to have that, whatever you're applying for. In this case, they are exceeding that 9 square foot limit. We have lots of right angle signs on King Street, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. And I don't know that there are any that are this shape, but we have round ones. This photograph right here, there's a round one right here. There's a heart-shaped one right here. And we have the same standard for how you measure those sign face areas and apply the restriction. And I don't think that I would feel comfortable allowing this sign to be larger than any other right angle sign on King Street, because if we do that, I feel like that would just encourage other people to do the same thing and come in with requests to exceed that limit. The sign companies that actually install these signs know what the rules are, and they know if somebody's getting a break, and so that becomes the break becomes the new standard, I think. So I don't think we ought to encourage that, and I think we ought to stick to the size limitation of 9 square feet. So my recommendation in this case would be for denial of the request based on not feeling like there's a true variance that is warranted.
All right, is this a sign, was it placed on the property?
I don't believe it's been placed on the property. I could be wrong about that.
All right, I didn't know if it was an enforcement issue or after the fact or this.
The BAR application here indicates that they are deferring this application pending their approval, pending size reduction or the BZA approval and final review by staff. So they found that it had to come before us to get a variance for the size before they would give their final decision on the sign.
Understood. All right. Is there anybody here in opposition to the application for the sign variance at 563 King Street? All right. I don't see anybody, Mr. Maslon, in opposition to your variance application, so we'll hear from you.
All right, thank you very much. I know it's been a long night, and so I'll try to be brief. I'm here with Angela Marino, who operates the Honey Hive. And a couple of quick facts about this one. As Lee mentioned, using the box rule, the sign exceeds the 90 square feet allowed by the ordinance. I didn't measure it because we got somebody that knows how to do it to measure it. But the actual sign is 8 square feet. So to give you an idea of the impact of the box rule, the sign actual face is 8 square feet, and using the box rule gets you 10.4. The sign, as Lee mentioned, has been previously reviewed by the VAR, and the approval was deferred pending coming here. To answer the question about whether it's installed, it is not. So we're here asking for this variance, and we'll need to go back to VAR if we get it. Now, as far as the variance test, everybody associates this shape with bees and honeycomb, and the applicant has invested and marketed its overall strategy, its trade dress, its design aesthetic around this shape. And they trademarked this brand and hopefully at some point plan some other locations. The only reason that it didn't get approved was because of the hexagonal shape. And as I said, the actual dimensions actually comply with the ordinance. And so, to our knowledge, no other building on King Street has got the same condition. Now, as far as the effectively prohibit, unreasonably restrict part of the test, by its very nature, and I'm sure this is obvious, but the smaller a sign is, the less functional it is. So Lee showed some examples of other signs, but the reason that people put billboards up by the interstate if they can, because for purposes of what signs do, the bigger they are, the more functional they are. If my client has got to reduce the size of this, again, using the 8 actual, 9 limit, 10.4 translation for a sign of this shape, we think it's going to be virtually unreadable. All it will be is a shape attached to the building, but it's attached above the awning and probably won't have any real utility if the variance isn't granted. Again, I would urge the board to look at the ordinance, which says 9 square feet. The technique that's used to measure it under 54.403 takes into account a lot of empty space, and it really treats square and rectangular signs differently than everybody else. So if this sign was square, if it was rectangular, it could be bigger. But because it is hexagonal, under this rule, it cannot be. There's no real reason to treat it differently. It doesn't serve any particular interest that I know of. And it appears that the box rule is more of a rule of convenience and expediency than it is, actual regulation of signs. The ordinance doesn't prohibit irregularly shaped signs. It could say all signs have to be square, rectangular, and the ordinance doesn't contain any particular definition of square footage. And I tried this analogy out on my wife. She didn't like it, and I hope you'll like it better than she did. But to me, it's sort of like saying you can have a 50-foot building, but we're going to give you a 10-inch ruler to measure it. And so here, what we've got is a 9-foot allowed sign, but the way you measure it, you can't have a 9 square foot sign. And so to me, that is an unreasonable restriction on this business, because again, if it was a square sign or a rectangular sign, it can be bigger.
Now, as far as this detriment to the other properties, again, you see from the absence of any opposition that there isn't any, as Lee mentioned, there are signs up and down King Street. And finally, the BAR, when they approved this, really was very complimentary of the sign. And the comments were, you know, it's interesting, it ties in well with the other aesthetic of the building. You know, different is not always bad. It's kind of nice to have a little something different on King Street. And if we will flip back to it, the sign itself is a pretty handsome sign. So I'm glad to answer any questions. If you have any, I would ask that you approve the variance and allow the sign as it is. Yes, sir.
So, first of all, that was a great argument. So, secondly, I'm worried about the city's point of view about this thing. I'm wondering if you know the sign were just designed as a square with the full 9 feet, is it, that's allowed?
9 square feet, yeah.
Could not the applicant put inside the square shaped with the honey coloring and everything else?
Well, I give you the obvious answer, which is yes. But again, as I think was mentioned, the reason we're here instead of doing that is my client actually already owns this sign. It's been manufactured. It's just not home. So that would require, again, them to go back and rebuild the sign. And again, if I was a design person, I would say that probably the square frame around the hexagonal sign detracts from the aesthetic. You know, my aesthetic limitation as well. And so I would think that a big part of the trade dress is that it is a hexagon and not a square hexagon. But sure, it could be that.
Would I be able to?
You'll have to ask the chairman.
Come on up here and tell us your name.
Detriment of this amazing argument. I just wanted to add, and I'm Angela Marino.
Thank you.
And I own the Honey Hive, and I signed my lease, and then 2 weeks later, COVID happened. So I'm one of those girls. But I wanted to let you know that on the actual sign itself, my GM, I was helping with the GC of the building myself, and so my GM and Brooks Signs got together and I explained to them kind of what I wanted. I didn't actually know what the parameters were. I didn't purposely break any rules. So my GM and Brooks Signs got together and created the sign, and that's how that sign came about. I had no idea that it was not even fitting into the box rules. So $4,989.00 later, I found out that that's actually the way it is. So I wanted to let you know that honestly, my intention was not to go above it. And if I had known that at the time, and if that had been something that was in front of me instead of plumbing and the kitchen and all of the other things, I would have possibly made a different decision. But at the same time, I think because of everything being branded and me being able to put this in a situation where down the road, you know, I can franchise this across the nation, and it can be something that's impressive, and that particular emblem can be noticed, you know, in many different cities. I think that's the reason why I decided to ask for John's help and to come in front of you. And I just wanted to let you know those facts too. And DHEC just gave me 100. Just say that too.
Unless there are any other questions, thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Maslon or for Ms. Marino or for the city? I have a question. Lee, is the box rule, is that defined in the ordinance, how to measure it?
Yeah, this is section out of the zoning ordinance, out of the part of the zoning ordinance that deals with signs. So this is up under general requirements, lists all the things, how you measure height, calculation of sign area, so on and so forth.
So, I mean, if I'm reading this correctly, they could just basically put that sign in a frame, right? And have the same, maybe not exactly the same aesthetic, but, you know, this 4-quarter frame, right?
Right, as long as that frame did not exceed 9 square feet.
Fortunately, I think some of the cords on those two sides. take it out of it. Yeah. So, I'm sorry.
But it's only, there hasn't always been, right angle signs have not always been permitted on King Street.
Well,
It's been
I don't know.
well, back when I did this in 1993, they were not permitted. And I think that with the parameters, you just choose your design decision based on that. Like those other ones that you showed, the circle, the heart, so they all are significantly smaller than this one.
The circle definitely is, because I found the permit for that one, and it's less than 9 square feet by drawing the rectangle around it.
And pretty, I mean, the sign, the people that make the sign, I mean, they know.
I agree with that.
I seem to recall that the Jim and Nick's sign was the first right angle sign.
Right?
In a long time.
It was.
There was a big discussion about that. But I think too, the box rule makes sense because you could have, for example, U-Haul, they decide they want a 6 foot wide, a 6 foot tall U shape. By area, may still satisfy the 9 square feet, but you know, inside of a box would be much larger. So I think the calculation, while simple in its, you know, its enforcement, is actually to the benefit of everybody. It's a lot of flexibility working in really defined requirements.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, no, not at all. I just don't remember off the top of my head the percentage of coverage for a sign if you just did a normal above the door or a sign.
Well, there's a general rule of 10% of the facade, but then the BAR gets to reduce that even further because they want to make sure aesthetically that it fits the building that it's on. So they have policies that govern how they approve those signs. But in this case, and they still have to approve this sign because it is in their jurisdiction, but they're just simply trying to follow the rules.
So just making the sign just that little bit smaller to fit the parameters, would that be a huge detriment to the look of the whole thing?
Well,
Because it's a fine, you know, it would just mean reducing it just, you know, that amount that might be more aesthetically pleasing to your building and to the streetscape.
well, as Lee mentioned, to put this sign in a box is, you know, would still be too large. And again, I'm trying to puzzle it out, but
I
you
just
take a sign that's
make it a
a
little
square
bit
foot
smaller.
smaller than it needs to be. And that translates into almost 2.5 feet bigger, right? So an 8 foot sign becomes almost a 10.5 foot sign. When you apply the box rule, my guess is that this probably reduces it, I don't know, 5.5 square feet to get it into a 9 square foot box. So,
That'd be a 10% reduction.
you're taking half the signage area away.
So it would be, in your opinion, too small if you.
It'd probably be about the size of that circle. But again, this is a sign that is going to be up on the building. And so if you take a sign that small and you put it up at the right angle sign, my guess is that it has not much functionality as a sign. And the point is so people driving by and walking by see what it is.
And one more thing I might add, do I need to stand?
Yes.
Yes, okay, sorry, John. One more thing I wanted to add, I don't know if you noticed that on this photo, but there is a metal awning that comes out in front of my front door. And it comes past my front door a good bit, and it's part of the building, and I can't do anything to adjust that at all. And so what happens is it keeps me from being able to put a sign that you would typically see on King Street because it's such a setback. If you think about it, when you're walking under and you're walking on the sidewalk, when people go to look for my sign, they either step out into the street or they get past, all the way past it, and then they look. Let's say you're at dispensary and you turn around and look to see what that is. I stand out in front of my business almost every Friday and Saturday night. And so what happens is people will go, where is this place? I don't know. And they're having conversations about it because I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but the extension for the metal for the awning is pretty far out above the front door. And that's why it's giving me an issue of being able to see, even if I were to put it on the building, because it's difficult to see any signage at all. And that's why I went for the right angle sign, because I thought it made more sense. The people next door have one, so I was thinking to myself, oh, that looks good. It makes more sense. It fits the aesthetic for the neighborhood. That's how it started.
Yeah, well, this is especially tough because your attorney has made some excellent arguments and certainly seemed like a great business owner and responsible person, and it's a difficult circumstance, and certainly I'm sure that every one of us feels like we want to help you. But on the other hand, we're also bound by the city ordinance, and we have to worry about setting precedent for other properties that they want to come
Mr.
back in.
Bachelor, what's the requirement for how far toward the exterior these signs can extend? And the reason I ask is because just kind of ran the numbers. It's about 4.5, 5 inches smaller would fit the area requirement. And my question is, can that be offset by extending it, additional 4 inches further out? Does that address that projection question?
I don't know. I don't believe there's a restriction on that in the zoning ordinance. So I think it's up to the BAR to determine. And also, of course, you have to get an encroachment permit to put things on the base of the building that encroach in the public right of way. So there could be some restrictions there, but I wouldn't think extending it out a little further would be a problem. I don't know. I'm not sure.
At least you have a very reputable sign company. I'm sure we'll work with you.
All right, any further questions or discussion? Ready to put it to a vote?
I'll make a motion for denial.
Okay, Mr. Bennett moves to deny. Do I have a second?
Second, so we can put it to a vote.
Okay, Mr. McKay is going to second that motion, and I suppose this is going to be another roll call so that we can, there may be some different votes. So, all right, so the motion on the floor is made by Mr. Bennett to deny the application. The motion is seconded by Mr. McKay. Let's go through the order, Mr. Morrison.
You don't put that in this time. This last time. Oh, I think the sign's got to be squeezed down. I think it can still be that shape, and most of the content can be kept. I'm worried about us going against the literal language. It's what the law is, and so I'm for vote against the variance.
Okay. So, vote in favor of the motion to deny, Mr. Bennett. I said all in favor. All right, Ms. McKay.
In favor of the motion.
All right, so 3-4, Mr. Richards. So we actually have a unanimous vote. Unfortunately, the variance application is denied. I'm sorry, it's a difficult decision for everybody. I think you can tell we spent some time with it. It's very difficult for us to make that decision, but we hope we find a solution that works out well.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the final application for this evening is B10, 396 Hugie Street, number 110, AKA 1A Dewey Street, North Central, PMS number 460-03-02-140, requesting a use variance, section 54-203, to allow a retail use vape shop with days of operation, Monday through Sunday, and hours of operation, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. in a DR-1F diverse residential zone district. Retail use, Monday through Sunday, closing no later than 8 p.m. previously approved by the BZA-Z. The owner is Simmons Housing LLC, Guy Simmons. The applicant is Kasim Potter. Mr. Bassett.
So this property, which sits on the northwest corner of Hugie Street and Dewey Street in the north central neighborhood, has a residential zoning, and it does have residential units upstairs, but the ground floor is commercial space. And here's a view of Hugie Street. And there are 3 commercial tenants in this ground floor space, and we're dealing with the middle unit right here tonight. So a number of years ago, the City Board of Zoning Appeals did approve a use variance to allow retail use in this space with hours that would extend up to 8 p.m. And that may have been because that's all the applicant was asking for, or maybe that's what the neighborhood wanted. I don't know. I don't remember that. That was years ago. So we've had retail uses there. Well, now we've got a retail use that would like to stay open a little bit later and extend those hours until 10 p.m. And actually, one of the commercial businesses and one of the other commercial businesses in this building is permitted to stay open until 10 p.m. and maybe a little bit later. But so that's already in existence on the property. And then I'll just take you on a little tour. So they submitted an application with this petition signed by lots of people indicating that they're fine with it. And then they submitted this map, which includes some businesses nearby that have hours that go beyond 8 p.m. So just a little bit of a tour. This property over here, this is a restaurant over here. This is in LB. So all these properties over here is on limited business. And if they have businesses in them, conceivably they could be open until 11 p.m. at night. This business does not stay open that late, but it's in that LB zone, so potentially it could, I think. And then right down here, in this building that you can see, this brown building, that's the Faculty Lounge, which is a landmark in that area. And they stay open until 2 a.m. That's a bar. And then on the other end of the block, the subject property is down here. We've got this restaurant called Renzo, and they're allowed to stay open until 10 p.m., I believe, or 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., something like that. So we've got other uses on the street that have those hours. I think 10 p.m. is certainly suitable in this location. This is a short distance from Rutledge Avenue, which is in the commercial corner that we've got there on Rutledge. So My recommendation is for approval. We're not aware of any objections or concerns, and I think the neighborhood association was contacted and they said they didn't have a problem, or at least they didn't express any problems to us with this. So our recommendation is for approval.
All right, is there anybody here in opposition? No. And nobody's here in opposition. The city recommends approval. Do we have the owner applicant here? Like to say the board. Thank you. All right, anybody have any questions for the owner applicant or for Lee? Do I hear a motion? All right, Mr. Morrison moves to approve. Is there a second? All right, Ms. Richards seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously. The variance is granted. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Yeah.
No wonder Allison got sick.
Oh, there you are. Yes, sir.
Hey, listen.
Thank you,
She
thank
could-
you,
she could have-
thank you, same to you.
And
All right, Al. So I sent you a little email.